Okay, it's going. We're talking today with Greg Silliman. He was one of the firefighters that fought the Record Center fire in 1973. Greg, we always start out just a few basic questions. Where you were born, where'd you go to school, when did you decide you wanted to be a firefighter, and then we go from there. So,
okay. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. I was interested in firefighting probably about my senior year in high school. I joined the West Overland Fire Protection District and spent about 4 years with them, kind of going through the ropes and learning the trade. I had a couple of full-time jobs, but after realizing that what I was doing at the time wasn't for me, I decided to get into the firefighting full-time. There happened to be an opening at Hazelwood, and I applied for it and got the job, and the rest is history.
Okay. So, July the 12th, 1973 with this fire.
Mm-hmm.
Were you on duty then?
Yes, I was on duty. It was kind of a quiet night for us. We may have had an EMS run or two, but predominantly the action of the night was coming from North Central Fire Alarm. We couldn't hear the truck traffic, but we were able to hear all the alarms being dispatched. And about the time they would dispatch one alarm, we would just about fall back asleep, and they would dispatch another one. This thing kept on going until everybody was just up looking at each other, wondering what in the world was going on. At the end of our shift at 7 a.m., I called North Central Fire Alarm and asked if they needed any additional manpower, because we had a whole crew coming off duty that we could go help them out, and they said absolutely, we need all the help we can get. So we loaded up one of our staff cars, and I think it was 4 of us went over there on the initial run. And I can recall as we were coming down Page Avenue, seeing that big monumental building over there with the entire 6th floor fully involved, was just like, OMG, I can't believe this is actually happening. But we got there and checked in with the fire officers from Community Fire District, and they gave us some assignments, and we helped lay hose and set up monitor nozzles, just like those pictures were indicating there. And we did that for maybe an hour or two, and it was strictly an outside fire at that point. We did decide that we would try to make an interior attack, and there was a group of about 4 or 5 guys, and I volunteered to go with them to go up the east stairwell. And it's been a long time ago. I can't remember whether that was a fully enclosed or a partially enclosed stairwell, and went up to either the 5th or 6th floor. I'm not sure if we were going into the fire floor or the floor underneath it. We had a hard time getting in, and actually had to pry the door open. The door was extremely hot. Once we got the door open, there was, I would say, 5 or 6 inches of water on the floor, and the water was scalding hot. And that water started coming out at us and cascading down the stairwell, and it just instantly filled that stairwell up with smoke and steam. And let me tell you, that steam was hot, and it was just intolerable. So we had to abandon our plans and go back down to the ground level. Other than that was the only interior attack that we had. After that point, it was just a matter of relieving some of the firemen that were already there. I know at two different points. I was relieving the guy on the ladder truck of communities, and I noticed when I got up on top of the 85-foot ladder truck that you could see fire from one end of that building to the other, and it was just totally involved. I forgot what the building dimensions were, but it was a pretty big building.
It's huge.
And that's a lot of fire. And it was a concrete structure, and it did not want to ventilate. It just the fire kept consuming things and wouldn't vent. So, and it didn't vent until there was actually a structural failure in part of the roof. Once that occurred, the fire was able to vent to that point, and we started making progress, closing in on both ends of it. So that's basically it as far as the actual fire went.
You mentioned when you got up on the inside, you had trouble getting the door open.
Yeah.
Had it somehow melted shut? Was it that hot?
No, I think it was probably a security thing where it was an exit door, probably openable from the inside only for people to exit out into the stairwell.
And then right at the start, you mentioned monitor hose.
Yeah, the monitor nozzles were the play pipes that we were hoisting up. Oh, they're on that collage over there. There were 2.5-inch play pipes. There's some right around the corner there, and there's also some deluge guns that we were hoisting up onto the upper floors to start an interior attack. We were assisting the community tying those things off and hoisting them up. We did 2 of them, but I'm sure there was a lot more than that hoisted up that day.
When you went inside, were you having to haul hose up from ground level, or were there standpipes up there? Okay.
There were standpipes, I believe.
Yeah, I know they were there, but I didn't know if they put those in before or
It's
after.
been a long, long time ago. It's 40 years, and it's kind of hard to remember all that stuff, but
yeah. So then, okay, you get off duty, make a call, let them know that some of you guys are there to help. Do you remember who else went with you?
Larry Stafford of our department, and Fred Nixon, and I can't remember the other guy. Later in the day, we called back and had our emergency truck respond with a couple more guys for an additional deluge gun monitor nozzle.
Okay.
And so I guess we had a total of six guys there. I stayed there till probably midnight, and then went home because I had to get some rest before going back to work on a regular shift at Hazelwood. I'm not sure what time the city of St. Louis arrived on the scene, but that was one of the things that was kind of astonished all of us. This is the first time that the city of St. Louis assisted St. Louis County, and we were all kind of impressed with that. So it was like history being made, and we were standing there in awe as 15 Hook and Ladder came down Page Avenue and pulled in the Record Center. So that was one of the big memories that I had.
You remember anything about well, we know it was hot, anything about like the smells? Was there anything hitting you?
I wouldn't say it smelled that much different than any other fire at that time.
Yeah. So, how long then did you actually end up working this fire?
Well, let's see. Probably 16 to 18 hours.
Okay. Did you do any of the, later on after they got it put out, and we know they were hiring guys to come up there and work like fire watch duties. Did you do any of that?
I didn't do any of that, but I know people that did.
Yeah.
Was that your only shift that first day that you went?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all the time that I spent there.
So when you actually got the door opened and got up into that 6th floor, were you guys able to make a push at all to get in there?
No. It was untenable.
Yeah, because I guess with the way it was going at the time, it was pushing all that heat towards the inside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it did, especially after the building vented itself. But that wasn't until later. In fact, I think it may have been in the evening. But when that vented itself, it really started pushing towards the inside. But that's also what helped us get it put out.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was just wanting to spread any way to the outside. And it looked like there was, I mean, I couldn't tell, but when we originally arrived on the scene, it looked like there was some warpage going on, and I couldn't tell if the roof was shifting or whether those were window mullions warping. Exactly.
Yeah, because that roof was a good, like 18 inches
Yeah,
thick.
it was
maybe
real
more
thick.
than that.
It was thick.
And that was that good, we just called it army concrete then, where the rebar is in there about like this.
Yeah.
So from the time you got there after 7 that morning to the time that you left that night, did you feel you did any good? You made any progress?
Well, I hope so. If nothing else, we relieved some of the guys that had been on the front lines from the get-go. So we were glad to be able to do that and provide a little assistance.
Did Hazelwood send any other firefighters out after you?
There was a couple more came, I think. I know Dave Hampton came and Ray Meyer came. And I guess that's about it.
Okay.
One thing to note back then, there weren't that many ladder trucks in St. Louis County because we didn't have that many big buildings. So they were having to strike these additional alarms for ladder trucks that are way out. It's not like nowadays where every fire station darn near has got a quint in it.
Sure.
Yeah, which is nice, and I'm jealous of the firefighters today that have all this neat equipment. But we didn't have that back then, and we had to call. Even I think Kirkwood was called.
Yes, they were the farthest south that came.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Ray Meyer. I know Ray passed away in a fire a couple years after that.
He did.
Tell us about Ray Meyer.
Well, he was the oldest guy on our department, and a lovable guy, and it was just one of those unfortunate incidents where I guess there was so much excitement and whatnot going on. He actually had a heart attack.
And that was at a carpet store, I believe, on Lindbergh?
On Lindbergh.
A couple of years after the Record Center, right?
Yeah.
And he died of a heart attack.
He died of a heart attack,
Okay.
yeah. Very sad day. And other than that, that's about all I can remember.
So looking at the photos here, they remind you, bring back any
it does.
memories? Or
It does. I remember Maryland Heights Jeep.
you see some of the smoke conditions in this one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot worse than that, of course, when we got there first thing in the morning.
So what else did they have you doing over the course of that 18 hours?
Just mainly relieving, taking water to different crews, just odds and ends of going to get stuff.
Whatever needed to be done.
Whatever needed to be done. Gophers, I guess, is what we call it nowadays.
Sure. You said seeing the St. Louis Fire Department there, that was a first. Any other first for you that day that kind of stand out as things you'd never seen done before?
Yeah. I mean, when we went to this fire and saw what was involved, we all knew that this was probably the biggest fire that we would ever see in our career. And I just wanted to do all that I could to be a part of it and to help out and help the guys that were the initial responders. But we were glad to be able to donate the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And you were doing it all for free.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Did any of your guys get called to go up there after it was put out just to, they had little hot spots once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Put those out?
No, not that I can recall. I think that I know that went on for several days afterwards, mm-hmm. but we weren't involved in that.
So, like you said, biggest fire you ever fought.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
One other question we're asking everybody, and this is just purely your opinion, because when they built that building, they purposely didn't put any sprinklers in.
Mm-hmm.
Because GSA was afraid that something would happen, they'd spring a leak, and water damage to all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So what's your thoughts on that?
It should have been sprinklered. Absolutely no doubt about it. It'd been a lot easier to dry out a few piles of records than it would be to try to recoup a whole floor of those records, and then all the additional water damage that the floors underneath it received from the firefighting efforts.
Yeah. Well, it kept me employed for 16 years, and it's still keeping my wife employed because she works in the preservation office there.
Mm-hmm.
We work on the records that were damaged by the fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think they're down to 9 people in there now. And, that's all they do every day long. They did an estimate 17 or 18 years ago when we still had close to 20 people working in that office. And if
mm-hmm.
there were about 6.5–7 million of those files that were damaged but were recovered. And they did an estimate if they started with number 1 and worked their way all the way through them, each one's an average of about 100 sheets of paper, that it would take something like 650 years at their staffing level then to get them all done.
Wow.
So, they just work on them on a case-by-case basis whenever the veteran or their family calls up. And we can take them, at least get them to a point where they can be copied and then send the copies to them.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we're wanting to do once we get this done is, because all of you guys that we've talked to since then have never been back, and want to get you up into that area, show you what we do with these records, and show you, that your efforts weren't in vain. You destroyed 18 million files, but we've still got these that we have, and even the ones that were destroyed can be reconstructed from other sources.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worked out good.
That's a lot of files.
Yeah.
18 million.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic, but in my hometown, our post office flooded 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And all the mail that was up, we don't have mail delivery. We have to drive to town to get the mail. So where they store the mail in the cubicles, that all flooded. So our mail had to be dried out, and somebody said that the government was helping them do that, and I didn't know if it was maybe some of the same techniques that the Record Center used to dry their files out or not.
Probably not, because I've heard with floods like that in little post offices,
mm-hmm.
when they go in and find the stuff that's wet, they just spread it out as good as they can, and a lot of times just like between two pieces of screen that are weighted down. And then if they have to facilitate it, they take leaf blowers and dry it out that way. We can't, we got standards we have to adhere to, so we can't do it on this stuff.
But after about 3 months, we finally got our mail. Most of it was junk.
I figured that's all I get anymore. So, you retired when?
I left the city of Hazelwood in '85 and went to work for a fire protection engineering company until Code Consultants Incorporated until 1995.
Okay. So when you retired from Hazelwood then, what rank were you?
Assistant chief.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit, what year did you started the Hazelwood Fire Department?
I started in '67. After a few years, I was promoted to driver or engineer, and a few years later promoted to lieutenant, after that to captain, and after that to assistant chief. So I was real proud of the accomplishments that I had made, and but I still thought that there was a lot I could do for in service and for the fire service. So that's why I went to work for the fire protection engineering firm. But there's been a lot of changes in the fire service over the years. Like I said, there wasn't near as many ladder trucks as there are nowadays. Mutual aid was a brand new thing back then. Not everybody believed in mutual aid, and I can remember where neighboring departments had fires right on our boundary lines and sent 2 or 3 of their own stations there, and if they couldn't handle it, it just burned to the ground. They wouldn't call anybody in, and that's just the way it was back then. Nobody complained about it, but that's just the way it was. Well, then after the Record Center and St. Louis finally assisting St. Louis County, I think that made a lot of people realize that it's not such a bad thing after all, and you got to see much more sophisticated mutual aid systems throughout St. Louis and St. Louis County. So that was a big plus out of all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know what a couple other guys have told us. It took a couple of phone calls to the city to get them to send that truck up, and as it turned out, because they were the only one that had a ladder that would put them up on top of the fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what Dave was just telling me, and I, being out on the scene, wasn't privy to all of that information and didn't realize all that went on behind the scenes. But that's pretty amazing that happened that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's all I got. Can you think of anything?
Good.
Excellent.
All right.
Anything else?
No, thanks.
All right. Thank you for your time.